Good evening, everyone. Now is the seventh session of our biological series. Today's topic is on cell structure and cell organelle by our speaker, Dr. Manjari Rain. Dr. Manjari Rain is from Neuroscience Research Lab, PGIMER, Chandigarh. She did her PhD in the genetics of high altitude pulmonary edema and high altitude adaptation from Institute of Genetics and Integration Biology, Delhi, India. She has a background in pulmonology, cardiology, and neuroscience. Her basic area of interest includes genetics, epigenetics, molecular and cell biology, disease biomarkers, and translational research. Along with Dr. Manjari, we have a very special guest as a commentator for today's presentation, Dr. Ante L. Pejan. Dr. Pejan is a professor at the Dean's Office, Faculty of Medicine at McGill University. He has completed his MD from University of Zagreb, Croatia. He served as a professor at McGill University Department of Pharmacology and Therapeutics from 1976. His primary research interests include neuroscience, information technology, knowledge translation in biomedicine with a particular interest in developing areas. He is an active in national, international, professional, and public organization and is one of the active leaders in IBRO. So with this introduction, I'm pleased to begin our session and request Dr. Manjari to kindly upload your presentation.
Good evening, everyone. So today I'll be talking about the structure of cell and cell organelle. So let me share my screen first. So hope the slides are visible to you all.
Yes, it is visible.
Okay. So I'll be talking about the very basic structure of cell and about all the cell organelles. And since this talk is mainly for the non-biologist, my idea is to just give him some idea about what is a cell and what are the cell organelles and what are the functions of these cell organelles, why they are important. So moving on to first question is, what is a cell? So cell is a smallest unit of life. What does it mean is the smallest unit of life is the cell has everything required to sustain life by itself. So it doesn't require anything else to sustain life. So it is the smallest unit of life. So an organism is made up of these cells. The organism can be unicellular. That means that it requires only a single cell, for example, bacteria and amoeba. And if you see the organisms like us, like humans, they are multicellular. They are made up of many type of cells, many different kind of type of cells. So they are the building blocks. They are also the building blocks. They are also the structural unit. They are the functional unit. They are the biological unit. So based on the presence of nucleus, the cells can be called as the prokaryotic and eukaryotic. Prokaryotic means that there is no nucleus, and eukaryotic means there is true nucleus present. So what is a nucleus? So in this, the simplest diagram you can picture, you can see a prokaryotic cell. It's much smaller than a eukaryotic cell, and it has a membrane which is called as plasma membrane. Similarly, eukaryotic cells also has a membrane which is called as a plasma membrane. This is to separate the outside of the cell from the inside, so that the materials which are not required by the cell cannot enter inside the cell. There is some boundary, and the material which is outside cannot easily go inside the cell, cannot easily go outside the cell. So it's just like our home. We have a boundary, we live in there. So, but this plasma membrane doesn't mean that anything cannot move to and fro from this plasma membrane. We'll be talking about in our next slide. So moving next, if you see this cell, prokaryotic cell is very simple. The inner matrix, which is the present inside the plasma membrane, is called as the cytoplasm, is in both of the cell. However, the cytoplasm of the eukaryotic cell have many organelles. So what is a cell organelle? Like in our body, we have various organ systems which perform different type of functions. Like the digestive system is required to digest the food we eat. The respiratory system is required to take the oxygen and make energy for all the metabolic activities. Similarly, in a cell, there are different kind of organelles which have different specific function. One organelle will be responsible for respiration, the other is responsible for the digestion. That's why I said that it is the smallest unit of life, because it has everything inside in it to sustain life. So nucleus, basically the blue ring structure you can see, we had a talk on DNA day before on 22nd. So what that talk told us that DNA is the hereditary material, and the information that how an organism will be, it is coded on the DNA. So that's very important thing. So this DNA is present in the prokaryotic cell, and it is freely swimming inside the cytoplasm. It is not encapsulated in some specific organelle. So nucleus is the specific organelle, where here in the eukaryotic cell, the DNA is present inside a nucleus, which has a membrane. We call it as a nuclear membrane, which is similar to plasma membrane, with a little bit of difference. So here, the main difference in prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, if we see that prokaryotic are basically the, you can say, they are the oldest cells. The fossil records dates back to 3.7 billion years ago, and it is said that eukaryotes have developed from the prokaryotes. So prokaryotes are mostly unicellular, while eukaryotic cells are unicellular as well as multicellular. The prokaryotes are small in size, like from 0.2 micrometer to 2 micrometer, whereas eukaryotes are larger in size. In prokaryotes, you will find a cell wall. The plasma membrane, which is I talked about, along with the plasma membrane, there is a cell wall also present around the cell. So this is present in all the prokaryotes, while in eukaryotes, when it is present, this is chemically very simpler in nature as compared to the prokaryotic cell. So nucleus, as I already talked about, that nucleus is absent in the prokaryotes. However, the region where the DNA is present is known as the nucleoid in the prokaryotic cell. So DNA arrangement is particularly circular if I say the DNA arrangement is like a circle in the prokaryotic, and it's linear in the eukaryotic cell. And these, as I already told, that the cell organelles are present only in eukaryotes and absent in prokaryotes. Then in prokaryotes, also some other extracellular DNA can be found, which are known as plasmids. So these can independently replicate to form other plasmids. So they are rarely found in the eukaryotic cells. In both prokaryotic and eukaryotic, you will find ribosomes. I'll talk about ribosomes in next few slides. So ribosomes are smaller in prokaryotic, and they are a bit larger in eukaryotic cells. So cellular respiration is present in both the cases. The specific organelles which perform the cellular respiration is mitochondria, which is present in the eukaryotic cells. In some cases of prokaryotic cells, you'll find mesosomes, which are responsible for cellular respiration. In the cell division, we find the difference that in a prokaryotic cell simply divide, which is known as the binary fission. Whereas in eukaryotic cells, there is a very specific and very well-established method, which is called mitosis, to divide the cell into two exact daughter cells. So flagella, flagella is another organelle which is responsible for movement of the cells. So most of the prokaryote are unicellular, so they will be moving around as a single cell. So they require flagella, which is much smaller in prokaryote as compared to eukaryotes. The reproduction in prokaryotes is asexual, whereas in eukaryotic cell it is sexual as well as asexual. Prokaryotic examples are the bacteria and archaea, and the eukaryotes examples are the plant and animal cells. So what is a plant cell and animal cells? Means that it is as simple as the name suggests, that plant cells are present in the plants and animal cells are found in the animals. So there are some basic difference between these cells. So the basic difference are that the plant cells are basically square or rectangular in shape, but animal cells are irregular or round in shape. Cell wall is present in these plant cells, but cell wall is absent in the animal cells. So this is a very complicated diagram you will find here, which I have shown here. But as we move along the presentation, we'll discuss each and every organelles, then we'll be clear about what this picture is showing here. So this is a cross-section of a cell, you can say, and this green part is the cell wall, and this inside is the cytoplasm film filled with cytoplasm where all the organelles are present. Similarly, in the animal cell also, this is the cell membrane, and inside all the organelles are present. Okay, so nucleus here in the plant cell, there are present vacuoles which are larger, and they can be single also and centrally positioned. Because of this, the nucleus is shifted towards the periphery of the cells. Whereas the animal cells, the vacuoles are smaller and in larger numbers, and the cell, because of that, the nucleus is present in the center of the cell. In the plant cell, there is one more structure, cell structure, which is known as lysosome. So which is generally present in the animal cells, whereas it can be present in the lysosome in the plant cell, but it is very rare. The plant cell has a specific cell organelle which is known as chloroplast, which can be found in plants and in green algae, but it's not found in animal cells. So mode of nutrition in plant cells is autotrophic. This means that they make their own food, and where it is in animal cells, it is heterotrophic. This means that they depend on the other organisms for nutrition. So what is a plasma or a cell membrane? So it is a biological membrane which separates the interior of the cells from the outside. So this plasma membrane is made up of phospholipids, and it is present in two layers. So that's why it is called as a lipid bilayer. As you can see in this particular figure, that this blue are the hydrophilic part of the lipid, and this gray part section is the hydrophobic part of the lipid. So these two layers are such that arranged that the hydrophobic part is towards each other, and hydrophilic parts is exposed to outside and also to the inside of the cell. So this is why it is called a lipid bilayer. Cell membrane controls the movement of the substance in and out of the cells. So this is achieved by the presence of these proteins in the cells. So these proteins can be of two types. This is integral protein, which is transversing across the plasma membrane. And these are the peripheral proteins, which are present at one side of the protein. Some carbohydrates and cholesterol also present in the plasma membrane. So this cholesterol is actually important for the fluidity of the plasma membrane. So this plasma membrane is selectively permeable, and it is important for the transport of material in and out of the cell. So this integral proteins can be the pumps, like the sodium potassium pumps, which can help the movement of the sodium and potassium ions in and outside of the cell. So the membrane also, so this plasma membrane also facilitates cell adhesion, ion conductivity, cell signaling process, and also it serves as an attachment surface for many unicellular organisms. A cell wall, which is generally present in the plant cell, so it is more tough, flexible, and rigid. You can say it is relative to plasma membrane, it is more rigid, but it's not that much rigid, because it gives the tensile strength, but it is you cannot say it is rigid. Like in a plant, the plant is growing like it's going up. It is rigid than the animals who have locomotion, and I can like hold my hands like this. But plants are also not that much rigid. If you see, if a wind blows, they just blow along the wind, the branches and everything. So rigidity is should not be confused with the stiffness. The major function of the cell wall is to act as pressure vessel, preventing overexpression of the cell when water enters. This means when water enters inside the cell, they should not expand too much. So cell wall gives a protective, preventive layer so that the cells does not burst by entering of the water. Cell walls are present in most of the prokaryotes, in algae, fungi, and plants. So the content of the cell wall in plants is mostly cellulose. So here you can see in this section of the cell wall, it is a complex network of cellulose, hemicellulose, and pectin. And in algae, the components of cell wall are carrageenan and agar. In bacteria, it is peptidoglycan, and in fungi, it is chitin, which is specific to the fungi. So this layer, which is known as the middle lamella, if you see this section, there is some spaces here, white section. I don't know whether it is visible to you. So this middle lamella is actually shared by two cells, adjacent cells, and it helps in compacting, cements them firmly together. So this middle lamella is mostly present in, mostly pectin is present in this particular layer. So next after talking about the cell membrane and cell wall, we'll be moving up inside the cell. So inside the cell is filled with material which is called as the cytoplasm. So major component of cytoplasm is the cytosols, which is a gel-like substance. And the other component of cytoplasm is cell organelles. So cell organelles, as I already said, that it is present in the eukaryotic cells. So the organelles which I will be discussing from now will be for the eukaryotic cells. So these cells, internal substructures, these cells organelles have a specific function. We'll be taking up it one by one. And also there are various cytoplasmic inclusions. So these inclusions are small particles which are insoluble substances which are suspended in the cytosols. So this cytosols behaves like a sol gel material. What this means that sometimes it behaves as a colloidal solution, which is sol, and sometimes it behaves as a more firmer or solid mass of integrated network. So we call it a gel. Moving on to after the cytoplasm, I'm talking about directly about the nucleus, since we have already discussed about the prokaryotic and eukaryotic. So the nucleus is one of very important organelle of cell because it has the DNA inside of it, which is the hereditary, which has the hereditary informations, and this nucleus is also helping, which controls growth and reproduction of a cell. So this nucleus is also a very prominent cell organelles which can be easily seen under a microscope. If you see these section, the nucleus is easily visible, but other organelles are not visible. For viewing the other organelles, more high quality microscope is required. So this particular picture shows you the structure of a nucleus. So a nucleus is a double membraned organelle, which is known as the nuclear envelope. And this nuclear envelope has pores in it, which is known as the nuclear pore. If you go inside the nucleus, you'll find that this particular DNA is present in an entangled string-like structure, which is known as the chromatin. So we'll be talking about the chromatin also. And this chromatin is more denser here. It's becoming more and more denser to form a structure which is known as nucleolus. There is no membrane for this nucleolus, and it is a specific function in ribosome biosynthesis. The material, cytoplasm-like material which is filling inside the nucleus is known as the nucleoplasm. So talking about the chromatin, this is basically formed of DNA, which is the basic hereditary structure, double helical structure, which you can learn about in the talk of 22nd September. It has been already been broadcasted on our Facebook page. So this double helical structure now supercoils along these proteins, this 8 set of proteins which are known as the histone proteins. So there is a double coiling over these histone proteins and then form a beaded structure. So this beaded structure, the DNA present in between the beads are known as the linker DNA. So these structure, what happens that it causes the DNA to condense. The DNA is very, very long. It has billions of nucleotides in it. So it has to be condensed in the nucleus. For that, it needs to be coiled around the histone protein. It coils around, then forms solenoid and supercoils, and it is present as a chromatin inside the nucleus. It further condenses at the time of the cell division, which is mitosis, to form chromosomes. So these are the more further condensed form of the chromosomes. So the chromosomes have two arms, which is connected in the center by centromere. The ends of the chromosomes are known as the telomere. So telomere are basically the repetitive 6-nucleotide repetitive DNA strand. So these do not code for any gene, but it is important. It is important to protect the genes which are present in the center of this chromosome for any aberration, mechanical aberration or any chemical aberration during the mitosis process. So this condensed form of the chromatin is known as the chromosome. So the nucleus regulates the synthesis of proteins in the cytoplasm. So the information which is present on the DNA has to be transferred to form a protein, a specific protein, so that cell can perform its job. So how it is done? So this DNA during the time of the cell division replicates itself, means it forms its own duplicate. So that process is known as replication. So when how this flow of genetic information will go to protein is by two processes, which is known as transcription and translation. Here the DNA inside the nucleus, the mRNA is formed by the process known as transcription by copying the coding information of one of the strand of DNA on RNA. RNA structure is similar to DNA, but it is single-stranded and has a ribose sugar in it, as well, whereas in DNA there is a deoxyribose sugar. So this particular coding then decides what amino acids will come and form this protein. So this protein is a polypeptide which is made up of amino acids. So which amino acids will come after which amino acid has to be decoded from this mRNA. So this particular process is known as translation. This whole illustration, the flow of genetic information in a cell is known as the central dogma of life. So we'll be having separate lectures on each of this replication, transcription and translation in coming days. So I'm not going in very depth of these, just for your knowledge that the DNA will form the RNA, mRNA, which is the messenger RNA. From the nuclear pore, from these four, the messenger RNA will come out into the cytoplasm, where the protein synthesis will happen. So how this protein synthesis happen? For forming a protein, what is required? So there is another organelle which is known as the ribosomes, which are minute particles consisting of RNA and associated subproteins. So they mediate the linking of the amino acid in a specific order according to the mRNA codes present on the mRNA. So what else is required is another RNA, which is known as the transfer RNA. So each transfer RNA has a specific code which brings the specific amino acid according to the mRNA code, and these ribosomes help in aligning these amino acids to form a polypeptide chain. So ribosomes can be floating freely inside the cytoplasm, and they generally make the proteins which is utilized by the cell itself. And when ribosomes are attached to the endoplasmic reticulum, which is another cell organelle, then protein synthesized, the proteins which are synthesized by the ribosomes is used inside the cells, or it can be used outside the cells, which will be secreted outside the cells. So moving on, as I was talking about the endoplasmic reticulum, that ribosomes are attached to the endoplasmic reticulum. So what is the endoplasmic reticulum? So basically, endoplasmic reticulum is formed by the extension of the nuclear envelope. This is double-stranded, and this particular structure is double-stranded, and it is formed in such a way that this is connected to the nuclear envelope, so that there is flow of substances between nucleus and the endoplasmic reticulum. So these membrane is folded to form flattened sacs, which is known as cristae in this case. These cristae are present very close affinity towards in the nucleus. So there are two types of endoplasmic reticulum based on the presence of ribosomes and absence of ribosomes. So when the ribosomes are attached to the endoplasmic reticulum, these endoplasmic reticulum are called as rough endoplasmic reticulum, basically because it's we can see them as beaded form under a microscope. Whereas when they are not present, the crusty walls are smooth, so it is known as the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. So the proteins synthesized by the rough endoplasmic reticulum remain within the endoplasmic reticulum, whereas others are sent to the Golgi apparatus, which lies next to the endoplasmic reticulum. So rough lumen serves the site for protein folding, modification, and assembly. So what is the function of the ER is to fold the protein. If the protein formed by the ribosome is a linear protein, so it needs to be folded in a specific manner so that it becomes functional. Folding of protein is very important to conduct the functions of the protein or enzymes whichever has been formed by the cell. So here comes the role of endoplasmic reticulum, will helps the proteins to fold and also modify. Some of the modification is done in the protein structure so that to form a functional protein. Whereas the smooth endoplasmic reticulum is associated with the synthesis of lipids, cholesterol, and also storage of calcium ion in specific cells like the muscle cells. In the muscle cells, the endoplasmic reticulum is specifically known as the sarcoplasmic reticulum. In the liver cells, this smooth endoplasmic reticulum contributes to the detoxification of drugs and harmful chemicals. The another cell organelle which is present just next to the endoplasmic reticulum is Golgi body or Golgi complex or Golgi apparatus. These are the three names for this particular cell organelles. So what is the function? That ER has folded the proteins. The proteins were formed. It has now folded. Now these proteins need to be transported somewhere where they can be utilized. So here comes the role of Golgi bodies. So Golgi bodies has two phases. One is the cis phase, which is present towards the endoplasmic reticulum, and which one is the trans phase, which is present away from the endoplasmic reticulum, or you can say towards the cell membrane. So what happens? The protein which has formed in the endoplasmic reticulum will be packed inside small vesicles and will bud out from the endoplasmic reticulum and will join the cis phase of the Golgi bodies. So after joining the cis phase of the Golgi bodies, their other essential task of the Golgi body is to sort the proteins. See, like the endoplasmic reticulum has made 10 kind of proteins, and out of 10, 5 have to send outside the cell, and 5 have to send and 5 have to go outside the cell, and 5 have to be utilized somewhere in other organelles. It has to go to lysosome or at the cell membrane for some cell signaling. So this process is conducted by Golgi bodies. It will sort out these protein in different vesicles, and from the trans phase, this will be budded out and it will be transported for its location, maybe it lysosome or it is secreted outside the cell or to the cell membrane by these vesicles. Excuse me. Okay. So next cell organelles are the lysosomes. So lysosomes function is more like the digestive system of ours. So these is a simpler structure. This is a membrane bound structure which has enzymes in it. So these can contain the hydrolytic enzyme that can break down the biomolecules, and the pH of the lysosome is acidic, as similar to the pH of our stomach. So the digestive enzymes which are present inside is required to dispose of the waste it's the waste disposable system. So whatever waste is secreted inside the cell, or some protein is not formed which is malfunctioning, or it is not formed in a well manner, so lysosome will go and digest that particular protein or degrade that particular organelle which is non-functional. And it is also known as the suicidal bag, because if the content of this lysosome is secreted inside the cytoplasm, the whole cell will be digested and dies. Beside degradation of polymers, the lysosome is also involved in other cellular processes like the secretion, plasma membrane repair, apoptosis, cell signaling, and energy metabolism. This is another simpler cell organelle which is known as the peroxisome. So the structure is similar to the lysosome, which is which has a membrane and has it helps in oxidation of biomolecules. It has some enzymes which carry out oxidation of fatty acids and amino acids. So while in the process of oxidation, hydrogen peroxide is also secreted. It's generated in the peroxisome, which nature is toxic. So that's why the peroxisome also has a catalase enzyme, which is another enzyme which breaks down the hydrogen peroxide to water and oxygen. So the role of peroxisome is not just limited to the oxidation of biomolecules, but it is now known that it has role as lipid biosynthesis, and it has role in conversion of reactive oxygen species. And it has also been known that in animal cells, cholesterol and dialcohol are synthesized in peroxisomes, and specifically in the liver cells, the bile acids are also formed in the peroxisomes. This is another specific cell organelle which is specifically present in the animal cells, and it is not present in the plant cell. So it is known as the centrosome, and it is the microtubule organizing center, and it also regulates the cell cycle progression in animal cells. So basically it has non-membranous organelle. So it has two barrel-shaped structure which is known as the centrioles. So these barrel-shaped structures are formed by the 9-triplet microtubule assembled in a cartwheel structure. So this barrel-shaped centriole is surrounded by a pericentriolar material. So this pericentriolar material is a dense mass of proteins that help additional microtubules formation. So these are the microtubules which are coming out of this pericentriolar material. So this particular centrosome is responsible for helps the cells to divide during the cell division when the DNA is separating into two separate poles of a cell, so that both the daughter cells have a similar number of DNA. The role of centrosomes comes there where microtubules are required so that the DNA is properly segregated into two parts. However, this particular centriole is not required for this cell division. The centrosome is required, but this centriole is not required. So what is the exactly role? Yet researchers are seeing what is the exact role of this particular centriole. The another important cell organelle is mitochondria. Most of you non-biologists might have also have heard about this. So as we breathe, we take in the oxygen and we release some energy to do our works like locomotion and everything. So in a cell, this process is conducted by mitochondria. So mitochondria is a double layered structure. The outer membrane is smooth, as you can see. The inner mitochondrial membrane is folded to form crystal. So the matrix inside the inner layer also has a mitochondrial DNA. So mitochondria itself has its own DNA, and this space is called the transmembrane space. So mitochondria is generally known as the powerhouse of the cell because here the energy is formed by taking up the food and oxygen, and in the process of converting into degrading into CO2 and H2O, energy is released. So this energy is released in the form of adenosine triphosphate, which is ATP. So in a single reaction, 36 ATP molecules are released. In addition to producing the energy, mitochondria is also store the calcium for cell signaling activities, and it may generate heat, mediate cell growth and death. The number of mitochondria per cell varies widely because the cells which are more involved in some particular process, there the number of mitochondria increases. So since mitochondria has its own DNA, it can self-replicate. It doesn't require the chromosomal DNA for its replication. So the theory says that this mitochondria is a prokaryotic cell which some billions of years ago got engulfed inside a eukaryotic cell, and formed a endosymbiotic relationship so that it was fruitful for both the mitochondria and the cell organelles, and later on it formed one of the cell organelles of a eukaryotic cell. The other cell organelle is a vacuole. It is a simple membranous structure which stores mostly water and with containing inorganic and organic molecules in it. So vacuoles are more prominent in plant cells. It can be present in animal cells, but they are smaller and more in number, whereas in plant cells they are prominent, and they acquire the most of the space of a plant cell. Vacuole are the storage structure that can hold food or something else which can be required in future by the cell. They also store waste which can be removed later on. And they are in the plant cell specifically, they have lots of water, and they provide a internal turgor pressure to the plant cell. Then this particular organelle, which is known as the chloroplast, is very specific to plant cell. As I'll go back to this mitochondria slide. So you can see in this mitochondria slide that your glucose and oxygen combined, and then the energy was released, and CO2 and water was released. So the chloroplast has exactly opposite function. The chloroplast is basically present in plant cell because they synthesize their own food. The process of synthesizing their own food is known as the photosynthesis. So this particular in this particular picture, you can see that the chloroplast is double membranous wall, and inside the chloroplast are present the coin structure, which each coin is known as the thylakoids. So they are stacked together to form a single stack is known as the granum. And these stacks are connected together by lamellae or stroma lamellae. The matrix inside the chloroplast is known as the stroma. So what is the specific about this chloroplast is that it contains chlorophyll, which is present inside the thylakoid. So like the mitochondria, chloroplast also has its own DNA, which is known as ctDNA or cpDNA. So it has also the same theory that some inherited from their ancestor, a photosynthetic cyanobacterium, which makes its own food, has been engulfed by an eukaryotic cell. So this particular chlorophyll allows the plants to absorb the light energy. The sunlight, which has the energy, is taken up by these chlorophyll, and they get excited, and an electron is released, and a flow of chain reaction occurs where the carbon dioxide and water is combined, and photosynthesis process occurs to form glucose, which is the food, and oxygen, which is released by the plants. So particularly this particular reaction is exactly opposite what we see in the respiration. So in respiration, the glucose and oxygen was forming and energy was released for the working of the metabolic activities. And here the carbon dioxide and H2O is combined together, and energy is required to form the glucose molecule, which is later used by the plant cells. So these are the basic cell organelles, which I think most of the non-biologists now can understand what is the basis exactly of a cell. So this was according to a typical cell, what a typical cell is, but the cells can be of different kinds. When you see a multicellular organism, each body part has a different function. Like heart has a different function, brain has a different function. So the cell does not have a specific designation. Maybe in some of the cells, some organelles may be absent. For example, the red blood cells, where the mitochondria and nucleus are absent. The only purpose of that cell is to transfer the oxygen. Or in the muscle cells, where the amount of mitochondria are very much, because you are using it regularly when you are moving your hand up and down or you're walking. So the most and more energy is required. So in that particular cells, the number of mitochondria is more. And like in the bone cells are stiffer. So they have the secretory molecules around the cells are stiff, so that provide the strength. So there the cells are different. So all the body's cells are different according to their function, but they all have the cell organelles, which I talked about. Thank you. I hope you liked my presentation. So I'll ask Dr. Padzin to comment.
Thank you, Dr. Rand. You have really done a very a great presentation of a typical cell, which is the basis of further discussion. And I would not ask you, but I would just comment, and you perhaps could also enlarge. Let's start with the one thing, which is what you stated, that the life started perhaps 4 billion years ago as a unicellular kind of structure. What really made life possible? We already discussed that this is a membrane, and what particular structure in the membrane we have that made the internal milieu, as it is called since 19th century, Claude Bernard, as a characteristic of life, is a protection of inside the cell by membrane and structures in the membrane, proteins. What are these proteins that make the inside different from the outside? They're the different types of transporters. And if we look at the number of different transporters, then we could see that because transporters have evolved over this many millions, not to say billions of years, this is one of the most diverse group of proteins that we have in the body. What are the proteins called transporters doing? Well, life, we believe, started in the sea. What is the characteristics of the sea? It has a lot of sodium and little potassium. And the cell, in order to differentiate its content from the outside, has a lot of potassium and little sodium. And one of the very important things that some cells, actually all cells, could use this gradient, potential gradient between sodium, high sodium outside and low inside, for certain functions. What are these functions? Well, for example, certain molecules like glucose could be transported with the help of this difference in concentration of sodium. One particular type of cell uses it for information. What is that cell?
Nerve
Sorry?
cells.
Nerve cells, exactly. So what nerve cells have is a particular set of molecules in the membrane that let ions go through under certain conditions. For example, one type of cell is voltage dependent. What does it mean, voltage dependent? Not cells, proteins, ion channels. When the cell changes in polarity through some stimulus, the cell, the ion channels for sodium open and let sodium in. And this is the kind of signaling mechanism that allows to be then used to propagate along the extended structure of axon. Now, what else is here of interest? I think that you have done so much in starting the structure that now we could say it is one of the big biological questions. We have seen structures of cells before we knew the function, and we are still, in a way, impressed by morphology more than physiology, because, well, let's go back and say, how do we study cells? What are the tools that we now use to study the cells? What was the first tool that allowed us to identify?
Microscope. Microscope.
Exactly. And we have many different types of microscope, right?
Yeah.
Which do you use any microscope in your research?
Yeah. We have this fluorescence microscope and electron microscope for picturing the
Or
cells and all.
maybe you could tell the audience how and why do you use different type of microscopes?
Well, one basic microscope is just for the viewing of the cell, where it is present and where is more concentrated. And if you are looking at the section of some tissue, you want to see where this particular kind of, if you are seeing a section of a brain, for example, you want to see where the hypothalamus is present, where the cells are aggregated. So one aspect is there. Then the other aspect comes in when we want to localize a particular kind of a protein. So we tag that particular protein with some fluorescent substance. Then we need a fluorescence microscope to see the light which is emitting from that substance. So that then this specific microscopes comes in and which tell us that this particular cell has increased expression of a particular protein, which whatever we have tagged to study. So here,
Excellent. And of course, if you want to see even smaller structure, we use electron microscope.
yeah.
What is the problem with electron microscope? That it requires fixed tissue. So you don't see anything moving or anything that we have to reconstruct this functional behavior of a cell. Now let's go further. How do we study different types of cells? How do we study behavior or physiology of nerve cells? First of all, let's tell our audience what is the characteristic of nerve cells, unlike almost all other cells that we have in the tissue. What are the major components of nerve cells?
So nerve cells are not like a spherical kind of a cell. They are extended. They have a separate cell bodies, and they have some extensions coming out of the cell bodies, which are known as the dendrites. There is one particular extension which is very much elongated, so that cell body is present at one place, and this extended part, which is known as the axons, can travel all along the body to another end, so that a signal can be transducted through a single cell. So
Right.
yeah, so this particular axons also need to be protected from the adjacent environment. For that they have specific cells which are known as Schwann cells, which cover this extension of axon, and these forming a myelin sheet around it. So the as you were talking about the sodium potassium channel, where the signal would travel across this axon, is through this myelin axolemma of the axon. Axolemma is the plasma membrane of the axon. So here the polarization and depolarization happens, and a signal is conducted across the axon.
But some cells do not have myelin.
Yeah.
And it's important to recognize that myelin got into the function when and not only myelin, but sodium channels appeared in neurons when they needed to transmit fast signals at a distance. So when we look at the, shall we say, variety of proteins that are ion channels, then what we see that in comparison with these other membrane proteins called transporters that we have, for example, sodium, we recognize only 7 families. Potassium, we recognize 40. We also recognize a lot of calcium families, and that's all part of the evolutionary development. Myelin improves conduction by speeding up because the cell, unlike the cell without neurons without myelin, which continuously changes the polarization, depolarization. In the case of myelinated axons, the signal jumps across distance, across myelin space.
Was the node of Ranvier.
Exactly. Very good. Okay, so let's go on, and I think you have done so much that we could only touch few points to expand. You know, we advance in knowledge always in circles, right? When we go through elementary school, we actually every year repeat and enlarge what we have learned a year before. So now you have provided our audience with the basic idea what cell is, and now they could go further and explore different functional issues here. One that I would follow what you already said is the role or the way how mitochondria produce energy. Now, how do this energy production starts? It is glucose, correct?
This?
In mitochondria, glucose is oxidated.
Yeah.
And what are the products of this process?
There are so many byproducts like NADPH is there, FA, then GDH is there, FAD is there. So these
Right.
particular have the positive ions, and when they go to the electron transport system, where the electrons flow from the different protein chains and releasing the H plus ions at the end and the electron ions, which are utilized by the ATP synthase molecule to form the ATP from an ADP molecule.
Exactly. Now, there is also a whole set of things that are produced that may be harmful. You already mentioned them.
Yeah,
And that
reactive
is
oxygen species are
reactive
there.
oceans. That's right. So this is all removed by another set of proteins that are scavengers of this byproduct. Now, what happened, and we could also say, what is the process or disease when the production of these byproducts overwhelms the system that removes them? Which particular human and animal disease has extra glucose?
Extra glucose.
Diabetes.
Oh, yeah.
In diabetes, we have a problem metabolizing glucose because the pancreas that produces insulin fails, and therefore we have an accumulation of glucose. This glucose overwhelms the system in mitochondria, producing so much of these free radicals that they start damaging tissues around, proteins and so forth. So that's one. Understanding mitochondria helps us to understand this particular metabolic disease, but also a number of neurodegenerative diseases, which we don't have time now to go through. I would only go back to the idea that nucleus contains material that we now associate with heredity. And this is DNA that produces, that signals to RNA, and finally it ends up with the synthesis of proteins, right? How many genes humans have?
Don't remember the exact number.
It's really not important. No, we don't know exactly. When do we need to recall that one of the big
Mitochondrial DNA has 37 genes. I remember that.
A little bit more, but not much more.
Yeah.
And what is important for what is the importance of genes in mitochondria for the understanding of the history of human evolution?
Oh, well, the genes which are present in the mitochondria are basically for it produces the proteins which are responsible for this cycle we are talking about of producing the energy, the electron transport system and the Krebs cycle. So basically,
Okay,
if this particular is, and because of the presence of the chromosomal DNA, the mitochondria itself can replicate. It doesn't require the chromosomal DNA present in the cell. So what we can say, the mitochondria itself can act as a cell, which can survive, which got engulfed inside a eukaryotic cell of producing energy, because the eukaryotic cell didn't had a specific machinery, so it required the mitochondria to produce energy for itself.
that's
So
the ultimate symbiosis, right?
yeah,
Symbiosis, which means that two organisms could live together in harmony. Oh, not always, but what I was referring in terms of DNA in mitochondria is that when the ovum, the female cell of the two that needs to be fused in fertilization, the male part, which is sperm, brings its own mitochondria, which, however, are destroyed. So essentially, mitochondria in each of our mitochondria in our body contain only DNA from mothers, which allowed us to go back in history. And pretty much, this is, of course, a very complicated way of calculating the history of this DNA, but it allows us to say that we are all a descendant of one or few females that lived in Africa 200,000 years ago. So we are all cousins through this particular mitochondria. Of course, there are many other things. Now let's go back to the DNA in the nucleus. You mentioned that DNA is protected by histones. Why? You very clearly stated, because
not protected, but the DNA winds around these histones so that it gets histones facilitate the supercoiling of the DNA, and the DNA when it is in the coiled form, it won't be transcribed to form the mRNA. When it
that's
opens,
right.
then
What other function we recognize that changes the expression of genes? How about epigenetics?
yeah.
What is epigenetics?
Epigenetics is basically, if we see about the genes, they have a specific information and it states that this particular kind of a protein will be secreted by the cell. But the epigenetics is regulated by the environmental factors and also the type of the cells. Based on that, a particular protein will go to the genes and will upregulate or downregulate only a specific set of proteins, which will then give a specific characteristics to a particular cell.
Exactly. So if we just remember that every cell in our body has the same genome, all of our genes, but one cell turns into a skin cell, the other cells in neurons, the other could be kidney, and this is all regulated by the process which we call epigenetics. Now, the importance of what are the mechanisms that are shielding certain DNA from producing, for expressing its information. Well, one of the most common process is methylation of proteins, correct? but histones also could protect, and there are a few other mechanisms. Now, what is the most important recent finding in terms of epigenetic mechanisms? And I have a colleague in my department with whom I actually collaborate, Moshe Schiff, who has done some seminal work showing that environment influences epigenetic expression, and that this could also be transmitted to the next generations. So we now have something that changes entirely this big issue of nature nurture, which is with us from many centuries, so to speak. What is the role of nature or environment compared to our inheritance? And epigenetic is changing also how we understand evolution. And that's another topic for another lecture, right? That's not everything. Let's not put everything in one cell. Let's leave it for some other talks.
Yeah, so I will also request the lab, anyone if they have questions.
Yes, please. That's the important thing.
Am I audible to you?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So anyone have any question?
Ma'am, this is Sheetal. I have a very, very basic question. As we were talking about different kind of cells, so there different kind of cells in humans and animals as well? We distinguished between the animal and plant cells, but in animals itself, like humans have different kind of cells and animals have different kind of cells? Or
Yeah,
they're very similar?
most of the cells you can say in animals and humans, actually humans are also involved from the animals, right? So the basic cell structure are similar, but maybe there are more complex in humans, because in the positioning and the length may differ, but according to the function, like in the brain cells you will find the in the nerve cells you will find the nerve cells. The nerve cells is present in animals also and also in the humans. So may the function and conductivity or type of nerves may differ, but basically the basic cells are similar.
Here we perhaps should introduce a concept which has been lately recognized as the most important thing of looking at our organism and biology in general, and that is that studying one small part of a very complex, shall we say, organism gives us very little in terms of understanding of that whole organism, and that we have to look at it as a system. And this is in particular so with systems like brain, in which studying few brain cells together, which we could easily do, does not give us answers to many complicated things which link, let's say, behavior of cells with the behavior of the whole organism. There's this big gap between microscopic studies and macroscopic studies. And that's not only in biology, it's in all of science. We have a big problem of linking this, shall we say, big steps between something very small and something that we look as a system. And we have new ways of looking at it, new methods, new models. And that's something important to keep in mind, that from cell to the organism, there is a long way.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone have any question? Before anyone, I want to ask you a very simple question for the clarification for the general audience of this presentation. So I want to know that do cells talk to each other? If yes, then how?
Is this question to me?
It is for Manjari, sir.
Okay.
I think there's some technical issue.
Dr. Rand, this is a question, how cells communicate? It looks like there is a technical issue because her image is frozen.
Yes, sir. So you can answer this question for our general audience.
Well, thank you very much. It is crucial to recognize that cells do communicate in more than one way. Particularly some cells, for example, nerve cells, communicate through specific connections called synapse. Dr. Ran, are you ready to continue answering this question, or shall I continue?
I didn't hear the question actually, so you
Oh,
can.
right, right.
The
How
question.
do cells communicate?
Okay.
And I started to talk about specific issues of nerve cells that communicate electrically, but largely chemically, because at the end of a structure called axons, terminals, there are vesicles, which is another organelle where the chemical substances called transmitters are stored with the excitement coming down the axon, excitation coming down the axons. The content of these vesicles is released and acts on the postsynaptic signs. The connection is called synaptic. However, there is one very important thing, and that is that we have a very complex chemical communication between different cells in the body. And almost every year we discover some new, we used to call them hormones, but now we probably could all call them chemical mediators, which sometimes surprise us what we kind of what kind of soup we live in, right? Our body or our cells. For example, it was discovered that muscle contraction releases certain chemical substances that seem to improve cardiovascular system, not through boosting the energy or boosting the conditioning of muscles, but somehow differently. That's why it is recommended that all people, even older than I am, which is pretty old, do some very simple exercises with small weights. Now, as you see, this is a long way from the question. I would like to ask Dr. Rand to add to this discussion of cell communication.
Well, other communication are also, there are some specific protein present on the outer layer of the cells. So their different cell recognize this particular proteins, which are known as the through chemically, or the cell itself has the other cell has some different protein will recognize this particular proteins, so that this cell and cell will interact with each other and communicate with each other.
Excellent. This has particularly role in development of nerve cells, where glia cells work as a scaffold by which the cells in development, nerve cells, primordial nerve cells, know how far to go along the glia cells. That's another topic.
We have a question from Facebook audience asked by Dr. Rahul Tyagi. He wants to know, do metabolic products also act as an epigenetic inducer?
I would say that the question would go to Dr. Tadzin. He is more expert in that.
Well, in some sense, yes, because we could also modify methylation, and there is a whole set of attempts to change methylation, which is mechanism of epigenetic expression, by certain compounds that may kind of affect epigenetic mechanism. Methylation is involved in cancer, it's involved in neuropharmacology, and that this particular, shall we say, dietary products could modify epigenetic mechanisms. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Manjri, for discussing a cell in very minute details. And thank you, Dr. Pejan, for sharing your insights and giving your valuable comments. Thank you very much.